like popcorn. Okay, welcome to the People's Review Live. Today we have three wonderful guests, and this is hosted by the Quality State Policy Center, which is a nonpartisan coalition-based organization advancing fair elections and transparent government in support of all Wyoming communities. We were founded over 30 years ago by Wyomingites for the people of Wyoming, the Equality State. We also host a coalition of labor, conservation, and social justice organizations. So today we have a representative from each of our coalition pillars, to talk to us about the legislative process that just happened and some particular bills that they had their eyes on. So with that, we'll go ahead and start, and I'm going to turn it over to Jody Sanborn.
All right. Thank you, Jenny. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you all today. My name is Jody Sanborn, and I am the Training and Technical Assistance Director at the Wyoming Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. The Wyoming Coalition is a statewide nonprofit umbrella organization for all of the local domestic violence and sexual assault programs that exist around the state. So there is one program that exists in every county in the state of Wyoming. So we have originally had 23 member programs, as well as supporting programs that exist on the Wind River Reservation, as well as programs at F.E. Warren Air Force Base and at the University of Wyoming. So we currently have 21 member programs. There have been a few programs who have consolidated across counties, but regardless, there is representation for services and survivors and advocacy that exists within every county in Wyoming. So our role as a statewide coalition is really to provide support and advocacy to those local programs in the communities so that they can best do their job. So part of that means that we do policy advocacy and education with legislators, and then also with the local programs in communicating with their elected officials, and also to bring forward any areas where they need additional support through legislature, or if there are any concerns, so any areas that need to be addressed. And so with that kind of shapes how we think about the policy advocacy that we do. So as an organization that is 100% federally funded, we are not able to provide direct lobbying with those funds. So instead, we engage in a process of policy advocacy through relationship building with legislators and education. So while we can't specifically say, we urge you to vote no on House Bill whatever, we can provide them with detailed information and education and have conversations with them so that they can hopefully shape opinions as to what would be considered helpful or harmful in those areas. So I am located up near Sheridan, Wyoming, and so I'm not physically present in Cheyenne during the legislative session every year to be able to have these conversations and to communicate daily between what's going on in the Capitol with our statewide membership. So for that, we contract with a policy advocate for the session, who is that boots on the ground person for us. So for this legislative session, we worked with Linda Burt, and I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with Linda. I don't know, Linda might even be on the call today. If so, hey, Linda, thank you for all your work. But we worked very closely with Linda throughout the session to be able to communicate what was happening and then also what needs were. So our role as a statewide coalition was to provide Linda with educational information that she could then communicate to legislators, and it worked back and forth. I feel like it was a pretty good process for us this year. So for our session this year, we at the coalition had identified almost 50 bills that we felt affected our membership programs, whether that was directly tying to the legal or judicial system, to other areas which would have an impact, income or property tax. That's a big one that affects our local programs as well. So we had a big list that we followed. I'm clearly not going to go over all of those with you today. I'm going to focus on 3 bills that we focused on and had some success and then some struggle with throughout this session. I also want to say that our job was additionally complicated during this legislative session because right at the beginning of the legislative session, because we're federally funded, we were impacted by many of the executive orders that were coming out of Washington, D.C. So when we were receiving executive orders that said that we were prohibited from working on anything that had to do with gender, or we couldn't do anything that had to do with health equity, for example, that greatly impacted what we were doing here in Wyoming. So we had to kind of change course and adjust right at the beginning of the session. But all of that said, hopefully you all have an understanding of who we are and the process that we follow, because it's not as straightforward as just having a policy position, which we've had in the past, but we don't currently have right now. So the 3 that I'm going to talk to you about today were all Senate files that came from the Joint Judiciary Committee. So we had Senate File 7, which looked at protection order amendments. Just some background if you're not familiar with the language here. Protection orders are similar to what we think of when we hear about restraining orders, but protection orders are specific to victims and survivors of violence. So survivors and victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. So protection order amendments was Senate File 7. We didn't have any problems with Senate File 7. That one flew right through. So again, this was a Joint Judiciary Committee topic. It was worked during the interim. We had no issues with that coming through. I don't think there was really much discussion on it even. They flew through. So that was great. That was an example of how those interim committees and topics really should work when they're working perfectly, right? The topic and the bill has been worked and it flies through. So that was Senate File 7. Senate File 8 was also about protection orders. And this one really looked at, are protection orders effective during an appeal or when there is a review? So again, this topic had been worked. There wasn't really an issue and it flew through no problem. So both of those were signed into law by the governor, Senate File 7 and Senate File 8. Then we had Senate File 12, which was addressing permanent protection orders. So protection orders currently are time limited in the state of Wyoming, and there are a whole bunch of different things and factors to take into consideration for protection orders. And what Senate File 7 sought to do was have there be an option for a permanent protection order based on a whole bunch of different qualifiers. So it wouldn't be applicable to every single protection order that went through. There were a whole bunch of other things on there. But again, this was a Joint Judiciary Committee topic and bill, and so it had been worked. We thought it was going to be good. However, we knew that there would be resistance to it because one of the things that happens with a protection order, and this is due to federal statute, so it's not Wyoming law, but federal statute, is that when there is a protection order in place, the respondent or the perpetrator in the case has their firearms removed for the period that protection order is in place. So we knew that there would be some resistance from the firearms advocates and lobbyists because they would see that this was an infringement on their right to bear arms. And so we were prepared for that when it came to committee. I feel that we did a really good job of having local programs and survivors and victims testify. However, the gun lobbyists were the louder voice in the room. And that bill failed to make it out of committee. So there were only 3 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee who were present to work the bill that day, and they failed to move it out of committee. So, that's one of the things that's really disheartening to us, is when we've put so much time and effort into working those interim topics and those bills. It's especially difficult for survivors of violence who are, really benefiting from these types of things, and really put themselves out there to take the time to testify and talk about how they've been impacted by violence, but then also their hopes for how this will help them in the future, to then not even have it be considered for to move forward. So unfortunately, Senate File 12 permanent protection orders did not go anywhere this year. Also unfortunate is that because this was an interim topic and worked so heavily this last year, we've received recommendation, or not recommendation. We've been told that this will not be a topic in the interim coming up. Maybe years from now, we don't know. But in the meantime, unfortunately, there will be many victims and survivors across the state of Wyoming who will be harmed by not having this option for them. So, I know I'm not using all of my time here, Jenny, but that's just a really quick overview of the 3 protection order bills that we really focused on this year, and had mixed results with. So I'm happy to answer questions when we come back around to that point.
Well, we'll go ahead and do just a couple right now. And that is, are the local domestic violence programs losing funding?
Yes. So at the federal level, there have been drastic cuts to funding that goes to the local domestic violence and sexual assault programs. The biggest cuts have been seen from VOCA, which is the Victims of Crime Act. That takes regular repeated cuts from Congress every single year. Last year, in the budget session, we were able to get the local programs an almost, I believe, $1 million increase to the biennium budget for their funding. So those are state dollars. But when you divide $1 million over the biennium over 21 programs, that really doesn't go that far. And so programs are losing funds federally. Things are getting more expensive. These programs are operating on a shoestring budget, and yeah, it's really difficult for those programs.
And so a follow-up to that is, what do citizens of Wyoming do to demonstrate displeasure with SF 12?
Well, we go on a campaign to try to continue to educate our legislators, right? That's something that we really rallied around after SF 12 failed to make it out of committee, was reaching out to members of that committee as well as members of the joint committee, to continue to provide that education. The other thing too is we have a really good working relationship with the Attorney General's office, the Division of Victim Services, who are the statewide funders and the state federal pass-through administrators for those local programs. And so we work really well with them in being able to identify areas that we can lean into, where we think there might be some on-ramps, and then also just to continue to look at how do we need to address this maybe differently in the future. So we have really good allies there in the state government through the Attorney General's office, Division of Victim Services. So it takes a village.
Great. Well,
And sorry, one more thing. And, if folks are so inclined, local programs always appreciate donations.
that is great. And then, Jody, while we move to the next speaker, if you would, like, if citizens were only know about this topic peripherally, and want to learn more so that they can have a thoughtful conversation with their own legislature, if you have a website or resources to point them to or your contact, whatever you want to share, add that to the box or the chat box. Thank you. All right. Next, we have Kevin Reddy.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin Reddy, and I am currently the president of the Federated Firefighters in Wyoming. We represent career firefighters across the state who are organized with the IFF, which is the International Association of Firefighters. And we engage actively in state politics, lobbying, and elections, trying to protect our members and protect public safety when it comes to fire service. Everything in your fire department is funded by a politician. So there's an old saying, if we're not involved in politics, politicians can be involved in firefighting. So our focus at the state level revolves around typically workers' comp, uh, funding for cities, towns, and counties, and then our retirement. And that's the topic I'd like to talk about today. There was a series of bills dealing with in the investment in our pension funds. Wyoming currently has 8 active pension funds that benefit uh, all the public employees, and they're different trades, different crafts that are in the pension system. For instance, the teachers and the municipal workers are in what's called the big plan or the public employees plan. Our law enforcement officers have a variety of different pension plans. And then there are 3 fire service pension plans. The Fireman's Plan B, which covers the full-time career firefighters, the airport firefighters pension plan, and then the volunteer pension plan. And pension plan is funded by 3 mechanisms: contributions from wages by the members, a percentage of wage that's paid by the employers, and then the bulk of our funding in these pension plans deal with investment returns. And that's how these pensions pay out nearly $70 million a month. And most of that pension benefit is paid to citizens who live in Wyoming. The bills that we were concerned with were House Bill 80, which was stop ESG investing, and Senate File 199, no, not 191, which was a bill that addressed how the state would proxy vote their shares in these larger investment firms. For those who aren't aware, ESG is environmental, social, and governance. There are several investment companies that build plans with a under a framework that your money, if you purchase one of these plans, would say they wouldn't be invested in fossil fuels if you're concerned on the environmental side. If there's some social justice stance, you would invest your money based on a social justice idea. House Bill 80 meant to stop that. There's a lot of opposition to ESG, especially in an extraction state like Wyoming, where if our oil industry can't get funding to explore for potential new oil fields or get funding to drill, they can't drill oil, produce oil, and make a profit. So this one dealt with specifically fossil fuels. And then they also mandated that our investors could not divest from the firearms industry. And then the third part of where we could or could not invest dealt with healthcare, in any healthcare industries, whether it's insurance or providers that dealt with any procedures or products concerning abortion. If an investor, as the bill was written, if an investor participated in this, whether it was a fund manager or an employee of the state, they could be fined up to 3 years of their salary. So it's pretty significant. The concern that the retirement system and the Treasury testified to in the committee was that they would not be able to enter into a contract with any of these money investors, and we would lose out on the best talent for trying to get those investment gains. Our concern as members in the pension was if our funds are 100% funded in 30 years, they take money out of our pockets because of the shortfall. So in dealing with this through the House Minerals Committee, This was a great example of the legislative process being utilized to basically cut the really bad parts out of the bill and essentially make it banana by the time it passed the House. And I really got to give credit to the members of the House of Representatives um, amending this bill, removing the really toxic parts of the bill. And then I do give credit to the President Whiteman for keeping the bill in its drawer. Um, and it's a great testimony of going through that process. I did mention we have representatives on the pension coalition that basically cover all public employees in the state. And one of the biggest tools that we used was we engaged our retirees and our active members. We flooded the house with emails, phone calls, and really got the grassroots movement going. We switched a lot of votes on this issue because the public reached out and contacted the representatives. And the Senate also addressed this issue with Senate File 191. We actually supported this bill. Instead of dealing with trying to mandate how a money manager invests our $40 billion fund, this one dealt with how we vote our shares at board meetings when it comes time for corporate elections. And so both the Treasurer's Office and the retirement system will have a employee that will go to these board elections and vote on these boards for these companies. To vote our shares in a manner there. You wouldn't have, say, ExxonMobil board coming out against fossil fuel extraction, which is one of the examples that we were told is necessary. That bill did get all the way through the process, and so that will be something that the retirement system and office will be engaged in. That all stand for any questions.
Kevin, thank you. So did you notice if the new composition of the legislature affected the conversations around the investments and pension? Was there a lot of education you had to do? Did people come in already knowing a lot about this?
Yes, so the new composition of the legislature, this bill was part of their five and dime program, which Representative Lawley, I thought, had a great quote in committee where she said, "This is an artificial deadline. We don't need to pass 5 bills in 10 days, especially something as disastrous as this one. We need to work it. And so we're not harming our retirement system." Um, and so I think this particular subject was part of that leadership's new agenda. And so that definitely sped up the process for us a little bit. Certainly, there's a lot of misinformation about pensions that's out there. Wyoming's pension system is very well funded. We are extremely conservative in how benefits are paid out. And our 30-year actuaries are focused on a 100% funding threshold. To kind of put that in context, we just hired a couple of new firefighters staying in Casper, Wyoming. They started the academy a week ago, and their pension system is 99% funded. They haven't put one paycheck into the system yet. Their retirement 25 years from now is already 99% covered. So our system is very healthy, but there's always a lot of education, especially during politics, because there is a myth out there that our pension systems are underfunded or not managed well. It's just simply not the case.
Great, thank you. I think we'll go ahead. I think there'll be some, so actually, just as a quick summary, will you just clarify? So the end outcome of the bill was?
Oh, the House Bill 80 died in the Senate. It was not introduced for consideration in the Senate. Heavily amended in the House and then died in the Senate. So it's a big win for Wyoming public employees.
Great. And just to clarify, public employees beyond firefighters.
Correct. So this would have affected all of the pension plans, all 8 active plans. And we engaged with our partners, with the Wyoming public employees, Wyoming public employees retired. We had several law enforcement organizations that helped us out. The teachers and the teachers' retired organizations all played a significant role in amending this bill and leading to its result.
Great, thank you. And so we'll come back around for more questions. So as people are inspired, type it in there, and we'll turn it over to John Burrows next, please.
Great. Jenny, thank you so much. Marissa, thanks for all the stuff you're putting in the chat here. And then Jody and Kevin, thanks for your work this session and just kind of paving the way on the webinar here. Really appreciate it and glad to be on. So my name is John Burrows. I work with the Wyoming Outdoor Council. I'm the Energy and Climate Program Director. For those who don't know, the Wyoming Outdoor Council, we're the oldest independent conservation org in Wyoming, established in 1967. We are a 501c3. We have a number of staff all around the state, but our headquarters is really in Lander. And if you're ever in town, swing by. We'd love to host you and say hello. This year, we had a number of staff come down for different issues that we were engaged on over the course of the session. And some of you all might know, we did a contract also with Andy Schwartz, former Teton County legislator, as our main contract lobbyist for the session. In total, we tracked 22 bills this year, engaged on 22 bills. Actually, a number that's down from previous years. We're trying to kind of reprioritize and refocus on what are some of the core issues that we can make a difference on and invest in those. For my part, I work mostly on energy and climate related issues. A lot of the topics we work on, they span the full breadth of the conservation priorities. So clean air, clean water, wildlife is huge. This session, we had some real significant bills related to public lands. I'm going to talk a little more narrowly about some of the energy and climate bills. And for me, this is my 5th session down. This was my 5th session down with the Outdoor Council. And so the 2 topics I wanted to bring up here, I think they're really interesting stories. There are issues that we're going to see coming up again that have been prioritized in the interim, and probably again and again and again as we look down the future here for the next several years. And those issues relate to nuclear and nuclear waste. And the other one relates to solar, not so much utility scale large solar, but rooftop solar that you could find like on the roof of a business or a house. I'll talk about the 4 bills that really related to those 2 topics real quick here. So all these bills died. Nothing survived. Most went through the Minerals Committee, although one of the solar bills did go through corporations on the Senate side. On nuclear waste, the 2 main bills, and I guess I should preface and back it up a little bit just to say that this is a huge topic for Wyoming, and it's an issue that the state has had come up multiple times in the past, really since around the 1990s, of storing temporarily the waste from the country's domestic nuclear waste. That's been a question. It's been an idea that's been proposed multiple times, and it's been an idea that's been pretty overwhelmingly rejected by Wyomingites multiple times now. And at the center of the issue really is that the United States doesn't have a permanent repository for nuclear waste that's generated. That's what we're missing right now in a piece of this equation. And when we talk about economic diversification, we talk about new energy sources, we talk about the direction the state is going. I think that's important to keep in mind is, we're going to move toward utilizing more nuclear energy. Currently, we don't have a place to put that long term. And so what's happening is that's getting stored on site, on the site of domestic nuclear reactors around the country, where it can stay for decades, but not really centuries or millennia. So we got to get this piece worked out in the overall puzzle. That said, there have been proposals, there have been in the past, and we saw one this year with House Bill 16 to temporarily store that waste here in Wyoming as kind of a business model. And this came up very late in the interim in the Minerals Committee. It kind of barely squeaked by as a committee-sponsored bill, one of the last meetings they had in October. And we kind of think part of that is because it's an important issue people are going to engage on, and there should be a lot of important conversations and community engagement in that. So it squeaked in last minute as a committee-sponsored bill, and that was number one, kind of a red flag for us. And the core of this bill is kind of funny. It's actually a bill around definitions. And this is House Bill 16, used nuclear fuel storage. It would have changed the definition of high-level radioactive waste to exclude spent fuel as a way of circumventing our current environmental statute to bring that waste to Wyoming and expedite how we could bring that waste here. And we had a big problem with that. And I think a lot of people have, because high-level radioactive waste definitely includes spent fuel. That's in the definition of it. And so there's already this weird definitional mismatch between the federal government and how the state was classifying this. This bill came in last minute as a Minerals Committee bill. So definitely flagged it for us that we need to get people engaged on this. We need to slow it down, have that conversation. And ultimately, I'll say this got to committee, the House Committee, Minerals Committee, and we were so impressed by how the committee, a lot of newer legislators too, just had great questions. They had great questions, really impressive, and there was a lot of outreach done to prime them for those questions. So that bill died a pretty quick death in the session. But then interestingly, we had another nuclear storage related bill that was more nuanced come up. This was Senate File 186, Advanced Nuclear Manufacturers Fuel Storage, is the title. This came up about 2 weeks into the session. Wasn't a committee bill, and it was more nuanced in that it was targeted toward, and if some of you have been listening, watching the news, kind of the more advanced modular nuclear reactors, and having Wyoming be a hub for the development of those. And so this was actually a bill designed for that specific industry, to allow it to come and store nuclear waste in Wyoming in part of the manufacturing process. This bill, I mean, it was much more nuanced and a little bit harder and a little wonkier to explain. We immediately flagged it again as like, this is a really important topic. The consequences of doing this poorly are going to be something that Wyoming could be stuck with for decades, centuries, millennia. I mean, nuclear waste, it's toxic to human health for thousands of years, right? And I think it's kind of important in the context of these discussions to think, what company or business has been around for thousands of years? That will be the legacy of the waste until we get that permanent solution figured out. So it was a big flag here of like halfway or a quarter through the session, we get this bill kind of out of the blue, that's moving really quick, that's really focused on one specific industry. And so we raised a lot of the same questions. A lot of folks in our kind of coalition around this raised a lot of questions, went to the House Minerals Committee where it was debated. I think folks had a little bit more of an open mind toward this bill than they did just storing the country's nuclear waste as a business idea, because there is an economic development nexus here potentially in Wyoming. And the bill did die in a similar way. Although I will say that if you look at the interim committee discussion topics for minerals, nuclear energy is number one, or at least it was a few days ago. I know they met yesterday, and I'm sure it will be. We're seeing this all over the country. I think nuclear energy and just the energy demand right now is going up. So we expect this to come back around. And really, for folks on the call who are listening and thinking about it, I mean, the implications are really significant to Wyoming. However you think about nuclear energy, if you're for it, you're against it, questions with it. And we need to have that informed discussion as a broader community around what the consequences and true cost benefit is. We open Wyoming up to storage of waste and the nuclear manufacturing industry. So super interesting on that front. The next two bills, I'll tie them together real quick as kind of rooftop solar bills. For those of you who have kind of been around the session, these are perennial bills at this point. I think in the last, in the last 9 years, we've had, I think 7 or maybe 8 different bills related to rooftop solar. And it gets wonky really quick. But I think the thing to keep in mind is like what is at stake here is how rooftop solar customers are getting compensated for the energy that they produce. Utilities want that amount to be less. If you're a rooftop solar customer, you want it to be, you want it to be on par with the retail rate, which is what we currently enjoy. If you're producing energy on your system and it's going to your neighbor, if you overproduce, you'd want to be compensated at the retail rate for that electricity. So that's kind of what's at stake here. We had one bill start out on the Senate side, Senate File 111, net metering revisions. That was, we certainly looked at it as a bad bill. That was going to require the Public Service Commission to come up with new rates for rooftop solar customers. And really by kind of definition here, new rates would be lower rates. So it would hurt that rooftop solar industry, which is already just a fraction of, very small in the state already. Yeah, would significantly impact your ability to put a rooftop solar system on your home in the future. So that bill had kind of an interesting death in the Senate. It did die. It was a close vote after it got through Corporations Committee. But the more interesting story is actually House Bill 183, similar title, net metering amendments, but what started on the opposite side of this whole question, which was actually brought to Majority Floor Leader Representative Heiner as a bill from his constituents over kind of in the Cokeville area, ranchers who were looking to cut their electricity cost because we've just seen rates continue to go skyward. And that's a big concern for municipalities. It's a big concern for ranchers, businesses, and homeowners, right? Is just the increased cost of electricity. And that was motivating a net metering bill that was actually, we looked at and said, this is a really good bill. It would have increased the cap or the amount of energy a homeowner or a commercial entity could produce from 25 kilowatt system, which is like roughly what a regular house would utilize, all the way to a 200 kilowatt system. So a lot more usable energy there. It'd be great for municipal governments, for example, who are actually paying their utility bills on our tax dollars. It's a great way to reduce that cost. And we saw that bill sail through the House, which was neat, with the Freedom Caucus as kind of backing it. 56-4 was the vote. And then it had this collision course in the Senate where they just had, I think, a different philosophy on it. There's some certain legislators really have targeted net metering in the past. And what happened was it just got the heck amended out of it to the point where it was this Frankenstein bill. And we actually wanted the bill to die. Point being, there was a really neat coalition that was developed around this. It was a horseshoe type issue where you have a lot of Freedom Caucus legislators working with ranchers, with conservation groups, with businesses, airports, a great coalition of folks. And I know for a fact we're going to see this come up again, and hopefully in a good way, where some stakeholder efforts outside of the interim committee are going to come together, focus on solutions with the utilities, and maybe we can get a good resolution here in the future. So that's a story of 4 different bills, 2 different topics, and really happy to stand for any questions. All of them died. So a lot more to work on there.
Well, thank you, John. In the chat here, we have, these are maybe less questions, but apparently the man who managed the radiation disposal of Rocky Flats just died this week and donated his body for a study of sustained radiation effects, which I thank you for sharing that in the questions, but that was an interesting. The other is when you talk about the permanent storage for nuclear waste, is there no place in the world who has that? Or is Finland working on that? Something, yeah. Can explain.
Yeah, it's a great question. And there are perhaps some models to look toward. Finland is a good example of a country that's developing a permanent repository. I think some of the other Scandinavian countries are as well. France has got a reprocessing kind of facility for nuclear waste. I mean, there are some examples out there, but unfortunately, domestically in the US, this is an issue that's just, I mean, it just took a nosedive after Yucca Mountain about 15 years ago. And there hasn't been an effort, a really significant effort to bring that back. So we don't have that in the United States. It's sitting, all the nuclear waste that's been generated in domestic reactors is sitting pretty much on site. As canisters are getting older, it's been said to be safe for the next few decades, but we do need a solution, and it needs to be very well thought out at the highest level. It needs to be based on a consent-based system where this is not imposed on a community, or imagine being imposed on a community in Wyoming. And we have to understand what are the impacts of like the transportation to get it there from the 80 different reactors around the country. Logistically, this is a massive endeavor. We need the political will to do it. It needs to be done the right way. So a lot of really important questions. We know it hasn't been very popular in Wyoming. Maybe that is changing, but again, I think that's part of the discussion is, and why it's so important to make this an interim topic, honestly, to educate our legislators, to ask the right questions, and to educate, citizens around Wyoming around here's the cost and benefit and what we could be stuck with if things go wrong for practically forever. I mean, 10,000 years is kind of what the benchmark is for toxicity of this stuff. So
beyond our lifetimes. So, well, but all of you have mentioned the interim, and I recognize that some of our listeners may not actually understand what that is. So that is the legislative session in Wyoming happens in 2 months or 1 month every other year. And this year, 2025, it was 2-month session, and it is always in the winter. And then next year will be a budget session, so it will be only 1 month. Then in between the end of the session, which ended like early March of this year, the interim is until the next session begins in 2026. So during that time, our legislature meet and do their committees. So with that, they just met yesterday, and some of the committees may be reducing their time. The management council just met, and the committees may be reducing their time from for the amount of days they meet. And so I was just curious, like having some folks here who have worked interim committees. What are your insights, takeaways from working that? Is there enough time typically? Is there a different way that you would think could be something to consider? How do the public engage in that if they're able to? So any thoughts from panelists?
I'll take a stab at it. Certainly be engaged in it. If you have a topic that you're interested in, stay on top of the committee that the topic is being worked in, and go in with an open mind. There's 12 people on that committee, and just don't assume that they're all against you. Definitely work every member of the committee, and you'll be very surprised on how willing to listen most of our representatives, senators are, and hopefully your issue goes the way you want.
John, did you want to add? Or yeah.
I mean, I think that was super well said. Yeah, I think we were incredibly fortunate in a lot of ways, the access we have to our legislators in Wyoming. I mean, it's pretty amazing actually. And I think the interim is such a good way, and a lower stakes way to engage. So just echoing Kevin's comments there specifically. And yeah, tracking the issues, following the issues, showing up, galvanizing support. The interim is also supposed to be a time for education. And I do think with some of these issues that the discussion should be bigger than the interim. And it's interesting to note too, and I think maybe this was already said by Jody, or it was brought up earlier, just the number of interim committee sponsored bills that have died. I think there's some consideration for like a lot of time and taxpayer dollars and energies going into these meetings, and if only half of them or even that are actually getting signed into law, it's that's a concerning trend, I think, for many who are watching the overall process.
Jody, do you have anything to add about just like how much time you've spent in interim or working bills?
I don't really at this point. I think everything that has been mentioned by Kevin and by John is accurate for our work as well. In the past, when we've had a dedicated public policy position here at the coalition, the interim was very much something that she was in attendance for and was very much involved in. So for the last this last year in particular, we have not had that bandwidth to be able to be as engaged. So it really is dependent on topic, and also, again, working with our allies and our partners on some of these. Those protection order bills that I discussed were a very close working relationship with the Attorney General's Office Division of Victim Services. And they carried a lot of that load just because of the nature of where protection orders originate and how they move through the legal and judicial systems. So it's really important that, we have those trust in those other partners who, when we can't be there personally to advocate, they're able to pick it up on their end too. So that's really how we've had to operate over the last year, just due to our staffing.
Well, that segues into another quick question about coalitions and partnerships. And I think John mentioned it, and I think actually all three of you had mentioned that. And how do citizens, like individual citizens, what's the value add they can bring to any of your organization's work? Like showing up to interim committee meetings or talking to their friends. Okay, Kevin, you've got.
Sure, I guess I'll lead off again too. Um, public support is paramount in the issues that I deal with. The public safety. But as far as the labor pillar as a whole, again, the public has the ultimate say, and there's a new trend in our legislature when we're lobbying in front of committees. They're bringing in bill sponsors, elected officials, then they're asking for individual citizens to speak on the issue before a registered lobbyist or a leader of an organization to speak. So certainly if we have individual citizens that are passionate on an issue, there is an opportunity, and they are respected by legislature, and you might hear from the public. And other than that, just be engaged. Certainly, if you look at the election returns in the last from the 2024 elections, voter turnout was way down, and we get to select our leaders through our process, and people aren't voting; they're not getting a say on who's been elected. So individual engagement is of any candidate.
Yeah, I would echo that. Public input is very important. We know that public opinion, and especially those with a lot of social capital, carry tremendous influence within our citizen legislature. And, it's important, I think, for those who are engaging to be informed. Senate File 12 that I spoke of that failed to make it out of committee order on permanent protection orders, if you listen to the testimony, was full of misinformation and inaccuracies. And those voices were the ones that were the loudest and the most influential in the room that day, over those from the experts in the field who have been working in this and the survivors who have the lived experience. And so I think it's really important, while we are engaging and advocating for support from the public, that, you know, we also have to be doing that with our own public education campaigns, at least in the field that I work in. Just because, especially we know these topics are hot when we're talking about gender-based violence, and that can often come forward versus, you know, the accurate information that needs to be considered in shaping public policy.
John, did you have anything to add?
I would echo and just say I think it's engaged citizen voices that make a huge difference. And maybe a good example in my mind is just thinking about this nuclear energy topic, House Bill 16. Being in that committee, listening to the committee ask questions, looking at them read their emails. And there was a great statement made by one of the committee members in the Minerals House Committee, which is just like point blank, like I am looking at my emails. I am seeing no one in support of this issue. Why should I vote for it? It's like, that's where we make a difference, right? And when we can mobilize that, and when people can be authentic too and original, I think it makes a huge difference. Yep.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue, because no one's an expert on all the various topics that are happening at the legislature. And so as citizens, we have a panel of 3 experts here, which their contact information, the organizations that they represent are listed in the chat here. So feel free to seek out facts from experts in the field and do your own research so that you are able to speak more confidently and comfortably when you're engaging with legislature. So there were a fair amount of questions about the interim session and how that looks. ESPC we can answer those questions in our social media and different things as well. So to not go through that all, because it is elaborate, but I want to make sure that we have a little time to go over, to go over, Marissa. I'd like to share the floor with her to introduce the Legislative Accountability Project, which is a product that the Equality State Policy Center produced that is it's meant as a tool to help you all as citizens of Wyoming have some starting points to start conversations with your local representatives. So during this interim, not only are they're the public meetings, which often are in Cheyenne, Casper, and then sometimes they're sprinkled throughout the state. The calendar is on the Wyoming State Legislative website. But there's also just picking up the phone and calling your legislature and asking them for a cup of coffee and just talking, just to start building up that relationship. Because although we might not know today what will be on the session, what bills will be up, if you've already established a bit of a relationship and you are triggered either in a positive or a negative way about some piece of legislation in the heat of the moment at the session, that condensed 30 days or 60 days, then you have made that step forward to be able to contact that legislature more effectively and efficiently via a phone number or an email, and you're starting to build that rapport with your elected. So that's what we're encouraging you all to do. And now I turn it over to my colleague, Marissa Carpio.
Thanks, Jenny. And thanks, Kevin, Jody, and John. I learned a lot because I didn't have time to look at solar panels or protection orders or the pension bills. So I appreciate the overview. Jenny gave a great introduction to our Legislative Accountability Project. And I'll try to move fast, but if you can help me out by just throwing in a name of any legislator that you know, and we'll use them as an example. Whichever one I see first is the one I'll take. But first, I'll go through these first few pages. So obviously this is the cover photos. Everybody looking at can everybody see the Okay, perfect. We have an introduction page here that kind of gives some background, talks about our pillars, which we mentioned today: labor, conservation, and social justice. We are denoting them with a couple of icons just to make it a little bit easier in the later pages. LAP has been around for longer than I've been alive, probably. We had it in the 90s, back when we first formed, and it looked a little bit different since we didn't have the same vote counts on the website, wyoleg.gov, that we have now. Our most recent version was in 2018. Before this, and so we have kind of created it for the times. It's changed a little bit, but it keeps the same message throughout, which is, let's get this information to the public and let's the public use it to connect with their legislators. A little bit of a breakdown. This is the page. Obviously, this is not one of our legislators, but we'll have the name at the top, their photo, district, contact information, any bills that they've sponsored. And this is important because the bills that legislators sponsor show what they're passionate about. If they're passionate enough to put their name on something and present it to committees throughout the whole session, they're likely going to care about it a lot. So it's important to know when you're talking to them. Top contributors, that's individual contributors, wow, I can't say that word, and non-individual, which could be PACs. If there was a PAC, we usually put that on there instead of the party, but if they had no PAC contributors, we put the party contributors, how many years they've been in office, so knowing how long they've been a part of the legislature. And then you'll see, we'll talk a little bit more about the bills next, but the colors denote what, if we liked or disliked the bill. Again, this isn't tied necessarily to ESPC or any coalition members' specific stance or lobbying position on these bills. All just part of conversation and just kind of what we decided to put forward for this project. How to use, have a conversation. The challenge that I give you all is, if you don't know your legislator, look them up. I can pop the links in the chat to find your senator and your representative. But the challenge is, during the interim session, which is that time between the two legislative sessions, sit down with a cup of coffee or a cup of whatever with your legislator and just talk to them. And hopefully this will guide the information by giving you, or guide the conversation by giving you the information you need. Really quick, here are the bills that we chose. The top two are ESPC bills. Those are fair election bills that we did lobby on, and these were our positions. The first is House Bill 249. It was the runoff bill that remade our primary elections. Again, the explanation is there. I won't go too deep into these. Senate File 98, which was the addition of partisan affiliation on school board members. And you can see again the number, our position, and then where it died. Going through, we have the Senate Joint Resolution 2, which was the Federal Public Lands Transfer Bill. The other conservation bill is the House Bill 118 that talked about land exchanges with private and public entities. Our one labor bill is 175. That was the unemployment insurance bill. And then House Bill 341, which was the summer bucks or sun bucks that provided food assistance to children during the summer. And then 124, which was I can't remember the full name of it, but it was illegal immigration, detain, deport, and one other word. But each page, so hold on, let me check if anybody has put in a name. Jenny, I don't know if you can come on.
Brown.
Brown. Oh, which Brown?
Just go to one of them, whoever comes first.
There's only a couple. Okay, well, I'll go to the first one that shows up. How about that? Okay, so here's Landon Brown. So we can see, here's our position. It's red. He voted against this bill and then explains what the bill does. And the same for the rest of the bills. We go down here, we can see he's in Laramie County. He's been in the House of Representatives since 2017. He's currently on the Transportation Committee. He's actually the chair. All of his contact information, the bills he sponsored, his top contributor, which was Scarlett William from Jackson, and his top non-individual contributor, which was the Wyoming Caucus PAC. Again, his 9th year in office. So we have those for every single legislator. So let's say you have my legislator or my senator is Rothfuss. I can just type him in and it'll go to his page, so you don't have to, oops, sorry. So you don't have to scroll through. everything. I know I'm a little bit over, but the last thing I wanted to show you, if I can get there. This is our full list of our coalition members. Again, just because their names are on here does not mean they agree with the positions that were in this report. If you're interested in becoming a coalition member, email info@equalitystate.org. I also wanted to mention that we do not endorse or oppose any candidates for public office. This is only intended for your information for you to use with conversations with your legislator. And with that, you can find all of that information on equalitystate.org/lap, which I will put in the chat. Sorry, I know I'm a little bit over. And feel free to take a look at it. If you have any questions, reach out to us at info@equalitystate.org. Please take the time to dive in and really get to know your legislator or legislators in your area. And Jenny, I think that's all that I have.
Great, thank you. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience. Our next, we'll have the part 2 will be April 29th, and we will dive in more into the election-related bills. There were 45, so we feel it's worth having one panel just around that. So without all of that, thank you very much, and you can find this recording on our YouTube channel.